Welcome or welcome back to Let's Actually Talk. For those of you who are new here, my name is Emma Cornfeldt, and I take the time to interview people with all types of backgrounds on their life stories to make people feel heard and less alone. We discuss the concepts of change, core memories, mental health, and more. Today, I will be talking to Diana Diguido. Diana works at the same company as my dad, and he introduced me to her because of how inspired he was of her life story. After talking to Diana a bit off screen and learning about her through my dad, I just knew she needed to be on Let's Actually Talk. She dives into her challenges with insecurity and food relationship, the unique dynamic with her and her parents, the challenges of her divorce with her high school sweetheart, and now being a single mom and continuing her journey of finding happiness. I am so excited for you guys to hear her story and feel so inspired by her journey as I was. And without wasting more time, let's actually talk. So, hi, Diana.
Hi, Emma.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So, just like how we've talked before, I'd like to start off with just your background and that general question of who are you?
Yeah, and I love that question because I think as I have kind of been on my journey of life, I've definitely had pockets and moments where I think I um, understood who I was, but then there's obviously moments where I've questioned kind of who I am as a person and the values and um, kind of what actually makes me who I am. And so the different experiences and like I said, the journey have really shaped who I am, but I'm still really trying to figure out all the parts and pieces. And I like to say I'm a work in progress. So while I'm a fun, energetic person, I obviously have the other sides of me where I can be a bit judgmental or at times angry, frustrated, and don't like when those moments happen or when that side of me comes out. But through kind of talking through traumas of the past and why I am doing what I do in the moment, and having that self awareness has really helped, again, kind of dictate where I need to work in the future and ultimately be the person that I want to be. But I do think like I don't know that I'll ever reach the point where I truly know all the parts and pieces of who I am, but as much as I can know, I will know.
I love that response because I also feel like it's comforting because a lot of people are constantly trying to figure out who you are. And, like as an almost 20-year-old, I have no idea who I am. And, you're an adult and have already lived so much life and still have so much life to live. And you're still like, I don't know. Like a lot of people just don't know and it's okay not to know, which I like.
And I think there's also though this like stigma, growing up, it's always like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And your parents just put such an emphasis on either being similar to them or being similar to other your brothers and sisters or whomever that they may have in their own minds of like who they want you to become. So you kind of like go through childhood with this constant like emphasis from your upbringing on who your parents want you to be. And then you kind of get older and you're like, wait a minute, is that actually who I want to be? Or am I, trying to kind of create my own person? So I think it's hard because we at a young age are we are so kind of moldable and like we want to do what our parents say, but then ultimately it's like, did I go down the wrong path here when you can kind of take a step back and realize who you really are?
Yeah. Yeah. And did you feel that pressure from your family growing up?
I did. I think a lot of it came from just kind of watching and learning, right? Like when you're so young, you're just like so curious and inquisitive and want to know, like, watching your parents. Why are they doing this? Where are they going? What are they doing? What is their career? What emotions are they going through? And my family, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She had some side jobs, like just to keep her busy, but my dad was obviously the um, breadwinner in the family and was a very established businessman, and was always kind of traveling and trying to better himself and better what he could provide for the family. So I watched and learned a lot from him. And I think even subconsciously, even though he didn't realize it, like that had an impact on what I felt like I had to be growing up and just the pressure of like constantly going and evolving who you are and what you're doing and then providing for your family as much as possible. That like driven mentality was like without a question something that we had to kind of embody and even like growing up when the weekends, like we very rarely could we have sleepovers. We had, we didn't have video games. It was like, get up, let's do our chores, go mow the lawn, rake the leaves, like always kind of focused on key projects and things that we had to accomplish before we could do anything. Which I think plays a lot into, again, who I am from a career standpoint, but also from a parent standpoint,
Mm.
which has been interesting, again, to kind of take a step back and see how that experience in childhood impacted who I am as a mother and someone in my career.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to dive more into like your perspective of being a mother, but um, can you describe like your family dynamic? Can you describe what your parents are like? And I know you have siblings, what they're all
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. So we are kind of the prototypical kind of family. My mom, dad, and I have a brother and sister, both older. Um, and growing up, we grew up in New York and kind of moved around again based off of different like positions my dad was in within his company or different roles that he was playing as he continued kind of being successful or his track to being successful. Um, and we had an interesting kind of like, I think, like a house dynamic. It was very much in traditional sense. My dad was working all day. My mom was at home. She would prepare meals for him. We had to be kind of dressed and ready to go when he came home. We had to engage in conversation. It wasn't just like sit in front of the TV and be couch potatoes and let my parents eat off on their own. It was very much like a family type setting, which was good and bad, but um, there was a lot of tension, I think, just across our family because my dad was so kind of serious and driven and very rarely could show kind of the softer side of him or the emotional side of him, which made our kind of dynamic very sterile. There was not a lot of emotion, like I said, there was not a lot of affection being given. And I think that really impacted, my brother, my sister, and I even today, just in terms of our own relationships. But throughout our childhood, we were very involved in our community and our sports. My parents very much wanted us to make an impact on the world as much as possible. So whether it be in philanthropic events or just helping, humankind as much as possible was important. But we ultimately moved to Connecticut, Fairfield County, when I was about 8 years old. And that was a big deal for us because we had definitely struggled previously just from a financial standpoint and trying to kind of make our way to the big time to Connecticut was always kind of a dream of ours. So when we finally got there, I had some hesitation, but then went into school um, and had a really hard time. And a lot of that was driven from just my weight and my parents, kind of how they managed the household from just how we viewed food. And food was very much seen as a comfort tool because we had a lot of challenges. And like I said, we were dynamics and we turned to food as like something exciting and something we could all kind of center around. But it ultimately led to like tons of overeating and just kind of negativity. So to school was just like a miserable experience, was made fun of every day, definitely bullied. I would go to the nurse crying, wanting to go home, which was really unfortunate. But then, again, looking back and reflecting, it was probably such a critical kind of fork in the road for me in terms of either going down this path of, misery and having a really bad um, connection with food and with others in my life, or kind of looking outside of myself and realizing like I had a problem and I needed to address it and do something about it. So that's the path I did, and it kind of again bleeds back to my mom's mentality about like being driven and not settling and not being okay with just like this, standard or status quo. Um, so I kind of like took my life into my own hands. My parents put us into sports, lots of sports, and so that helped kind of shave off some of the weight, which was great. And then just learned a lot more about nutrition and the good, the bad, the ugly, and how to really monitor how I engaged with food. And I went through all the different eating disorders and just experiences with that, which sucked. And I think, during that time, it was so was such a negative kind of connotation around it. And even today, I think it's just hard for people to admit that they've had this really bad experience with, a relationship with food. And rather than treat it as a negative, how do we kind of use it as an opportunity to further educate people about food and kind of weight loss in general? So childhood sucked until I got to maybe high school, which kind of started a whole new chapter in my life.
Wow. Okay. So,
A lot to unpack there.
yes. So, if you're comfortable, would you mind talking about your experience with food? Because, I've said to you before, I'm someone who struggled with it. I know a lot of people have struggled with it before, and I'm interested to hear your journey as now like an adult with it.
Yeah. Like I said, I think like food growing up was just like a means to an end, right? It's like how much can I possibly get into my body? And it just made it was something that truly this our family was like excited about. Like how many different McDonald's could we go to or KFC or God, we went to like Roy Rogers and we would just like be addicted to fast food, or my mom would always get us like the TV dinners with the quintessential like fried chicken and brownie and corn and just like be total couch potatoes when we could when my dad was traveling. Um, but it was comfort. It was something that like we got some sense of joy from and had very little knowledge about like carbohydrates and sugars and red dye and all the things that I know today. But also just my parents were struggling with their own weight, so we didn't have great role models as it relates to like understanding um, the impact of weight gain, like on your body and the increase in heart risks and all that stuff. So we just ate as much as we could, and we were very. We always had parties. We always had big get-togethers, and like the Italian in us, like was always there was never enough food. So we would bring in so much food. But again, it was like exciting and we would have friends over and people would drink and eat and just be merry and all that stuff. But little, did you realize that just packing on the pounds. So as I got older and kind of realized that I needed to make that change, I just like did a deep dive into nutrition and understanding all the ins and outs and kind of chemistry of your body and how it impacts you and what you need to do to kind of circumvent that need and desire for eating. But now, as I continue to kind of reflect on it, I just felt very alone and like very. I couldn't talk to my parents about it because again, we didn't have like this emotional connection with one another. And so, I just remember sitting honestly like at a toilet, just being like, okay, here I go. Like it was just so like it was just uh what's the word I'm looking for? It was just like par for the course. Like it was nothing. It was just like this is what I do. Um and I had no one to talk to about it. And so ultimately I just reached a point again where I had to kind of pull myself out of it and learn, educate and try and get into a gym and like I said, sports as a way out. So that was positive at least.
So, when you were going through your eating challenges and getting educated with food, was it just you? Was the rest of your family just like doing their own thing? Or
Yeah, my brother and my sister um had their own struggles, but they not to the same extreme. My parents honestly today like they still struggle with their own weights and the yo-yo dieting, figuring out what they want to do. Um, but again, like there was something in me that was like, I just need hard, fast action. Like I need to drop this weight. I need to move quickly. Um, and so I just resorted to what I felt was like the easiest thing to do, unfortunately.
yeah, it is tricky and people sometimes they just think like, well, if I'm skinny, then I'm healthy. And it's,
It's
you
so
know,
true.
yeah, it's so true. I mean, I was literally talking about it today with my dad. It's so true and it's such a unique concept, but in a way, it's good that it happened at a young age. So now you
Yeah.
look and you kind of like got your head straight in those ways. Um,
But the
but I
only
want
thing I would, sorry, the only thing I would
to know.
say to that is just like how, like, even today as a mom, like, how do I prevent it for my kids, like, even getting to that point, right? Because it sucks, like, and it's horrible. Even now, like, my relationship with food, right? Like, I'll go and have a cheeseburger. Like last night, I had a cheeseburger and fries, but afterwards, you just feel like such a weight in your stomach, and you're like, oh, the old me is like, let's just make myself feel better, and go, throw up. But like you sit in it, and you're just like, why did I just do that? And just, some days I'm just like, can my mind just stop and like stop making me feel bad about what I just ate? Yes, you'll go to the gym tomorrow, you'll feel great, but like just enjoy the moment. That's where it sucks, because I wish I could just walk away from my meal and be like, that's okay, it's okay, you know. So there are moments, but it's still really, really, it's still hard. You still live with it. Your mind plays such tricks on you that are good, but then like just so self demoralizing, which
Mm-hmm.
the more you can work on trying to like take a minute and realize in the moment that that's actually happening, like the better, because um, I don't know, you send yourself into a spiral, it's a constant spiral.
Totally. And we also said this before, like the one hard thing with eating issues too is it's really hard for it to fully go away because we eat every day. We need to eat.
Yeah,
So it's so hard for it to go away. And it's also such a control piece because we choose everything we put
a
into our body.
100%. Yeah.
So it's like so
Where do you have kind of like your biggest, or what has kind of your relationship been with food and in general?
I mean, I struggled a lot with it in high school.
Mm.
In my freshman and sophomore year of high school, like something was going on. My baby fat just came up or something, puberty, and I just kind of blew up.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah, it's normal.
Yeah.
It needed to happen. But I was like, when I was younger, I was always very, very little. And
Mm.
then as I got older, I was like, what's going on? My body's changing. And um, I was like, yeah, no, I don't like this. I was like, I don't like it. And I went to
How
sleep.
old were you?
I was
Were
like 14 when I
Okay.
started, like, when it
Yeah,
started.
prime age.
Yeah, I just tried
Yeah.
myself. I was forming kind of more of like orthorexia
Mm.
and just hyperfix. I was eating, but I was just like
Yeah.
hyperfix, not eating a lot. But then at nights or like 2 days of doing that, I would be so hungry and I would just eat the whole
Bingy
can.
and like, yeah.
Yeah. And then feel
Yeah.
like crap, want to, just get it all out of me, just constant going to the gym, like working out
Mm.
every day after school when I just did not need to. Just it was too much. And my body was in fight or flight and it was
Yeah.
making sense. But then I remember I snapped out of it when I there was like a huge tragedy that happened in my town.
Mm.
I was like, fuck this. Like life is so short. Like
Short. Yeah.
fuck this. I was like, my junior and senior year, I calmed down a lot and my body fluctuated. Like I
Hmm.
naturally lost some weight because it was just fluctuating. I gained some of it back being in college. Um,
Did you have a boyfriend or anything? Like, did you
I
feel like,
did.
okay,
Yeah, I had a boyfriend in high school and I had like the biggest crush on him. So the fact that we were like dating
that was
was
a big deal. Yeah.
yes. So I a lot of my mind went to him as well, just being naive and obsessed with him. And my body calmed down. Um, And then in college, it kind of like started creeping up again with also like drinking and
Yeah, of course.
but just trying to have a level head with it. I'm in therapy too, so that
Yeah,
helps.
it helps a lot. I know it's like you have relationships with people, but that's like the relationship with food is very real and something that's on the same level as like a relationship with a person. Like the
Yes,
good, the bad, the ugly, like continues to affect that relationship that you have.
totally. So this is like a huge backtrack now, but
Okay.
I remembered when you said when we were talking about it when you were a child, you said you didn't have that emotional connection with your
Mm.
parents to talk about that. Would you mind like diving more into that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems too from like my parents' own upbringing, right? Like again, as I got older, like trying to deep dive into and being inquisitive about like, why am I this way? Or why do I have these outbreaks or uh, these moments where I'm just like not rational, right? And a lot of it stems from learning about how they were raised and their kind of house and family dynamics, which were frankly like really, really challenging. And a lot of what they went through did translate into kind of our own house. And so what I would say is that my my parents weren't close with their parents, and they did not have the same type of environment where, they were open and honest and direct with one another. There was a lot of fear in the household, whether it be mother and child, child and father, but then also between, my dad's parents. And honestly, in some cases, growing up for me, between my own parents. So like you were always kind of walking on eggshells and trying, I just so vividly remember trying to get a gauge and like reading the situation between my parents to understand like, what if I say this right now? If I were to say this right now, what would the reaction be, or what would happen, or how would like kind of the conversation progress, which also really sucked as a kid. But what I will say, reflecting back, I think that I have been really, one of the traits that I have that I think I am very good at is just like reading situations and reading the room per se, because growing up, that's all I did was just like putting little teasers out there to see how my dad reacted. Or I always remember like being like, oh, dad, like all these people are sleeping over at Emma's house. Like, isn't that cool? And then he'd be like, no, like, that's ridiculous that they're sleeping over. Or he'd be like, yeah, that's great. And then I'd be like, okay, can I go? Right. Like figuring out where the moments were that I could capitalize on these opportunities. But like we never gave kisses goodnight before bed. We were never tucked in. We didn't read stories. And again, that's not all to say it was bad, but I also think my parents were so young when they got married. They had kids so young, and they were trying to figure out like their own relationship and how to parent and then also balance a career. Um, so it just wasn't like a very homey vibe. But I always longed for it. Like I wanted it. And I see even today, like relationships between siblings and relationships with people and their parents. And I'm like, oh, like I wish I had that. Like you guys, your family and your dynamic with your dad, like that is so special and so unique that, and I know you don't, but people take that for granted. And like it's few and far between, I would say. And I think as a mom now, like as much as I can create that moment and that uh, dynamic for my kids is something I desperately want, because I want them to feel that love and that environment that they feel like they can be open and honest and affectionate and just like be who they are versus like walking on eggshells, you know?
Yeah. And so I guess now for you as a mother, like even when you got pregnant with your first child, what did you think about like with being a mother? Like what mother did you want to be?
Yeah, I wanted to be the opposite. I mean, mother, father, like I wanted to kind of be the opposite of what I grew up with, right? And I had a really hard first pregnancy, um, where my son basically like became toxic within me. So I had to go through an emergency C-section. They had to put me under, was in the ICU after, basically bleeding out. And that kind of similar to kind of your story really woke me up and was like, oh my God, like, okay, this is real. And this is like something that now I have to deal with while trying to parent. Because there's a lot of kind of things that went along with that. But I definitely wanted to instill at a very young age just this feeling of home, like when they're with me and that they feel the love. It's not just like me saying I love you, but you actually feel it and through actions and um kind of comfort, like as much as they can continue to feel that from me. I want that for sure.
Wow. Wait, I had no idea you had like a toxic pregnancy. What was that like having that?
Oh man, like I remember it was close to the end and I started getting all this back pain and they were like, oh, it's just back labor. So I went into the doctor because it wouldn't stop. I went to Stanford Hospital and my uncle, like I said, was my OBGYN. And typically he wouldn't come until like ready for delivery, but I didn't know he was coming, but they must have called him. So he came right in and I was like, why are you here? Like, this doesn't seem normal. And so he sat on the bed and he just explained to me that Ryan, my older son, was at risk, and that I was also at risk, and that they had to immediately start some anti-seizure medication and start all this medication to honestly like save our lives before he told me that I had to go in for a C-section. And that was like when I was like, oh my God, this was not the experience I was thinking of. Like, thought I would be screaming on a table about to give birth. So literally within like 20 minutes, they whisked me off. My husband at the time couldn't even come in the room. They put me, yeah, they put me under anesthesia. So I, didn't feel anything and I was asleep. Um, and then an hour later, I think I came out, but I don't remember anything really. Until like a couple days after because this medication was just so intense. But then like, you're dealing with all of these like hormones and emotions and like you're near your deathbed and then here's your child and it's like just the flood. And I remember going home from the hospital just like sobbing and being like, oh, it's not what I envisioned and not what I wanted. But luckily everything worked out. And my second pregnancy was, they watched me. I was more high risk. So um, it was easy peasy. I was like, I'm ready to have more. Let's go. So it's just such a difference. And my oldest son is the pain in the butt. So he definitely gives me a run for my money, which makes sense now.
That's a crazy story.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just like in the matter of minutes, I was like, oh no, I'm going to be here all day. I'll be in labor. And it was just like done. So
That is
you never
crazy.
know.
So, what are your children like? You have two boys, right?
Two boys. They're now 14 and 11, completely different. Just different interests and wants and needs. And I think that we have a really good dynamic just in terms of, like I said, like being very open, honest, direct, upfront about our emotions and how we're feeling. And I try to keep as much openness as possible because uh, that's just, again, not something that I was used to, but I very much wanted growing up. So they are very into sports. We love all types of sports. My older son is also like into science and math and exploration. So it's fun because you get to kind of experience all different sides of who they are and different interests and trying to make sure that everyone's happy at all times.
I love it. And so, I guess, do you have any examples of kind of your like parenting strategy to make sure they feel nurtured?
Yeah. Um, e- Ever since they were little, like I said earlier too, like giving them kisses goodnight, like I don't even have, if I forget now, they'll come in and like say goodnight to me, which is great. And then always hugs and, kisses when we say, well, if we're leaving one another or I travel a lot. So making sure that um, they really know like where I'm going, when I'm coming home, when I'm leaving. Um, Again, just gives them kind of comfort on knowing kind of the plan. Um, but I also think just like, through those fun things at school when they write essays and they draw pictures and, you get them back and you can see and hear and read just about like the impact that I've had on their lives. And that's really special to me is that when I can see it kind of through their own work and their own eyes versus like kind of forcing it if I'm in front of them. But I also really love that when I'm not with them and when they're with other people or we're flying out here to LA and the stewardess are like, are those your 2 cents? Because they never sit with me. They like to go up front as much as possible. And I'm like, yeah, she's like, they're so kind and nice. Like that is just so rewarding for me. Um, it just makes me really happy. So
So, I mean, we kind of touched on that it is just the three of you guys.
yeah, yeah. So I married my high school sweetheart coming out of high school, which again was probably one of my better school experiences and finally had kind of shaved some of the weight. But then went to college. I went to Villanova University. He went to Loyola. So we stayed together throughout college. And then kind of similar to my parents, like we got married young out of college and checked all the boxes. And bought a house and then had kids. And again, like, I think looking back, you're really young and still trying to figure out who you are, what makes you happy, and then you find someone that comes along that's like, "Yes, he makes me happy." Like, I feel just really excited and loved, and so we got married, and we had been married for about 7 or 8 years, and as people say, like, we just grew apart, had different kind of interests, and became different kind of versions of ourselves that we weren't as familiar with as, when we first got married. Um, and so we separated and then went through kind of some mediation, but ultimately decided that divorce was probably the best route. So I did the opposite of what everyone does, and I moved the kids into the city. And he was also actually in the city at that time. Um, and unfortunately, again, like, I think we kind of built this codependency on one another because we were so young and because we had some different like family depend yeah, dynamics. His family was fantastic with me and like really made me feel like home, like their house was my home. Um, and you know, did a lot of things that I felt like I was missing in my own home. So it was a great environment for me and one that I gravitated towards. Um, but when we decided to part ways, we told our kids, and then unfortunately he just took the wrong direction in his own path and um, went down a bad road that ultimately kind of cemented the relationship that he had with the kids like during that time, and it was just better that we kind of did a clean cut and he took care of himself, and I obviously would go on with the kids and kind of reimagine my life, which was an eye-opening experience because I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would be a single mom, especially after, just devoting so much time and energy to this relationship and like the whole entire kind of your own being, and it takes a lot out of you. So when that all happened, definitely like had my oh shit moment. Like, can I do this? Questioning myself, that self doubt, and there was still kind of a the relationship with my family was still a bit tarnished because again, traditional Italian, you don't get divorced, you kind of stick it out. So I got back into like this moment of loneliness and where do I turn and who do I go to? And I just decided to go all in with my kids, right? And figure out like how we created this new norm and just be happy as like our own unit, whether he was in their lives or not. So it hurt, it sucked, but ultimately I think it worked out the best that it possibly could have, and I couldn't have been happier with kind of the adventure that we are on and that we had together during that time. So,
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's crazy as a high school sweetheart, stay together in college
yeah,
and settle down and like I we've also talked about this, as also a child from divorced parents, you can see that like you and your ex-husband, you guys will never be strangers. Like you guys will
right.
forever have a bond, which is so unique. And you explaining that he went down this different path and you guys saw how each other just changed and
Yeah.
realized you couldn't be codependent on this person anymore. That must have just been so interesting and hard to experience.
Yeah. I think too, like I was just so enamored with him and again like how he made me feel that I didn't realize as well, like internally I had so much to work on and so much trauma I needed to get over. So he was kind of like the blanket over that, and then when that was ripped off it was like, oh no, now you got to deal with like your own stuff, which was like a blessing in disguise. I think that my experience with marriage and kind of love was a bit unique, or maybe not so unique because I feel like a lot of people are marrying their high school sweethearts the more and more I talk about it. But um, I never imagined that it would go kind of the course that it did. But I think ultimately, like I said earlier, it all worked out for the best in the end. And his involvement in their lives is kind of sporadic and based off of kind of what's happening on both sides of the equation, and what makes the most sense. So we figure out ways to make it work. And if it doesn't work, then so be it. It is what it is. So
And so what do you think your kids' relationship is like with their dad?
I think they have different relationships just because they were at different ages and they were pretty young. My youngest was 3 and my oldest was almost 6. And so
Oh,
I remember kind of talking to them when we originally told them, and just like, you go through the emotions and the tears and just like, what? Like, my mommy and daddy aren't going to live together. What does that mean for us? But I think that they've grown a greater respect for kind of like, again, what love really is, and what that looks like between two people. And that, quite frankly, like, more and more of their friends and just, people within school come from divorced families. So it's not so much like this awkward, like, my family is I have divorced parents. I remember when I brought them into the city and we were starting school, there was even like a banana splits program that they had at school. And they actually had the stat that almost 50% of the kids in that school had divorced parents. So it was like a good kind of community for them to be enveloped into at such a young age. But then, um, I would get the questions on like, where is he? When is he coming home? Why is he at my games, or here, there, or wherever? But then I think they just became accustomed to it and realized that it's okay, and that he's there when he's there, and otherwise, like, they just proceed with their life. I think the my oldest um, has a relationship with him, and is trying to kind of navigate that relationship, but also has a really mature perspective about who he is as a person, and accepts that very well. My younger is younger, so he's trying to kind of figure that out as well on his own. But you know how it is, right? Like, as a child, and I'd be curious to kind of get how you navigated that as well. But you have a lot of guilt as a mom. Is like, I created this a bit, and or we created this, and now you have to be kind of their biggest champion and support system as they continue to kind of deal with all the emotions and changes that comes with it. So it's been an interesting ride, but again, one that I think ultimately worked out and that they'll learn from and grow from.
yeah. No, as a child from divorce too, it's first of all so common,
Yeah.
which helps. And it is true. It helps give so much perspective on what type of relationship you would want in the future, what love is, what's healthy, what's not healthy. And I feel like with how you described your boys, they seem so mature, like being in
Yeah.
their and I think that's great. Also, we've said this too, like growing up in the city just gives you that
Yeah.
extra maturity
Yep.
and
Independence, and
yeah,
yeah.
and just being exposed to so many different people, so many different things. Like I think that's awesome for them.
What was the biggest challenge as a child of divorce? Like, what was the biggest challenge for you?
I mean, just guilt, like
Yeah.
remember in the beginning if I was with my dad one night and then like my friends wanted to go get ice cream, but it was the only night I had with my dad, it
Yeah.
would be confusing figuring that out or making sure I prioritize time to have dinner with my mom on Monday night because I'm going to my dad Tuesday night and just probably that, just like learning to find that
Yeah.
it's new for them too. And it's the first time for all of us, so no one's gonna
Right.
handle it perfect. So just figuring that out and
As the oldest, did you feel like you had to help your sister through it, or did you guys kind of just manage on your own?
I mean, I think we managed on our own, but she was more surprised than I was.
Mm,
Yeah, like I definitely knew what was going on. Like
yeah.
I knew it was happening and I wasn't surprised. And she was more surprised, but I think we both managed pretty like well on our own.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I was definitely more curious than she was. She was younger obviously than I was. She was just kind of going through the motions. I was probably a bit more curious than she was.
Mm,
We were both pretty, like, solid about it. I remember, like, my dad, when he got his apartment, we were like, "Ooh, fun, let's pick out some fun bedding." Like, it was
yeah,
just, like,
exactly.
making it not
Making the
deep, like
best of it.
yeah, so and it was fun. His apartment was, like, right downtown Fairfield, so I got to, like, go
That's
out with my
awesome.
friends, and it was fun.
How does it
Um,
feel like with your dad being with someone else? Like, is it strange or awkward, or like, do
I
you
mean,
feel bad for your mom? Like, what are the feelings there?
yeah, I mean, it's a very unique experience.
Mm,
It's really confusing with, how they got into a relationship and their story has made
yeah.
it well, um, because, I want to stand by my mom. I want to honor my mom and I know how she's been affected throughout their story, but also this woman loves my dad and makes him so happy. So it's definitely been a really interesting road, and we're all still figuring it out.
Yeah.
But I've said to both my parents too. I'm like, I just don't have the energy to care. I don't
Yeah.
like
Yeah. You
know
do
my dad.
you.
Yeah, like I know my dad's girlfriend isn't going anywhere. Nothing has changed anything. I'm in college.
Yeah.
Like when I interact with his girlfriend, she's very pleasant.
Right.
It's not like
Right.
she's lost or anything,
Right.
and I don't see her that often. And then other than that, I do my own thing. I've also said to both my parents, like I told my dad, I'm not going to look at you like an ex-husband. I'm not going to look at you like a boyfriend. I'm going to look at you as my dad, and you're an amazing dad. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like,
No, that's great. And it
yeah,
hasn't changed how he treats you as a dad. So,
yeah.
yeah.
If anything, I've said to both of them too, since their divorce, they've been better parents and co-parents,
Mm,
which is huge.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah. So just like figuring out that route. And I'm sure with your boys, like, since it's obvious, every story is different, but I'm
Yeah.
sure with your support, like they feel good.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And I think at some point they'll figure out their own course and develop their own relationship, however they want that to be with him. And, you know, I have to be supportive of that, as you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so tricky. It's a first time for all of us. Like, I feel like I forgot that as a child. I was like, it's the first time for my parents too. Like, no one knows what we're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly
it's
right.
like
Yeah.
and it's also nice, I feel like I'm sure your kids will start to appreciate this over time too, is like it was a chance to see your parents as also human.
Mm,
It's kind of comforting to see that because they kind of look perfect and you idolize them,
yeah.
and I still do, but it was nice to see them as human and nice to see them cry and be like, I'm upset and I made a mistake. It was just good to see a good learning experience.
Yeah, like there's cracks in the foundation, but that's okay because that only will make them stronger, you stronger. And again, it's like it's role model, right? Like how they navigated that part of the journey speaks volumes to you both and how you're going to ultimately navigate your own relationships and the challenges that those present. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
1000%. Um, and so I guess this is kind of a little of a random question. Was like when you got together with your ex-husband, you were so young, but did you see
Yeah.
traits in him that were like your parents and that you found comfort, or was it opposite and you wanted to get away from it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think he had a lot of what I didn't have, like, growing up. So he was very funny, adventurous, spontaneous, outgoing, very sports, like, forward, and like I said, like, we had a very serious household. We weren't emotional with one another. Like, th he had all of those qualities that I was, like, just desiring from my own house. So I think I again I gravitated towards that and I just jumped in like fully into the relationship and gave it everything I had because I was the reciprocation was there and I was just feeling all the joy and love and fun and laughter that it came with. And like again his family was like really my family. And I think as we like progressed in our relationship though, like I think that his mother struggled a lot with me having somewhat of the control over the relationship and, him and taking him away from her. And, that created a rift which was really unfortunate. They actually didn't attend our wedding and told all of their friends to not attend our wedding. So we got a lot of amazing the return cards. They would write notes on the return cards about how awful we were, which was really mature. Um, but again, like all these ups and downs, I think just made us stronger and like really dug us more into the relationship and like
figuring out who we are. Um, but then obviously, unfortunately, it didn't work out, but that's okay.
So do you not keep in touch with his family as much anymore?
No, we did not have a good kind of ending there. Yeah.
Your boys aren't either.
No. No. Yeah, I
And
know. Which sucks because I always, like, loved the whole, like, grandpa part, and they just don't have that. I mean, yes, my parents are obviously involved in their lives, but that comes with a whole slew of other things. But I do think that his parents would have been great grandparents, but unfortunately, just again, the path didn't land there. So it's what it is.
yeah, wow. And so now as an adult, with your life taking so
Yeah.
many different and having so much unknown throughout it, how would you describe yourself today?
I would say I'm definitely a stronger, more independent person that is okay with um being myself, and being the authentic part of myself. Um, there are parts of me, like I said when we first started, that I absolutely hate, and I'm just like when like that side of me comes out, I'm like, oh my god, like go back in, like why did that just come out of my mouth, or just like those self reflection moments. But I'm really proud of, like, where I am at emotionally, physically, with my kids, and, that took a lot of time and focus and energy to get me to be able to even say that, because I've never been one to kind of tap myself on the back or, take pride in anything that I've accomplished, because, again, kind of back to my childhood, it was kind of expected, and, of course, I am where I am today because, that's the expectation. But as you like, even from our last conversation and this conversation, like I took time to be like, God, like there's a lot of crap that like we go through as, children and into our adulthood. And just like having these moments where you can actually talk about it, and then like being able to look back afterwards and like really, again, keep saying reflecting, but it's so important because I'm just like thinking about the conversation and saying like, I really didn't like that evoked this response or that emotion when I was saying this, and then like just digging in a bit deeper into it and pulling back the layers, I think is really helpful, and it has taught me a lot about just again where I've been and why I am the way that I am. But I'm excited about the future, and I'm excited about like this continuous learning cycle that I'm on. Um, Continuously learning and growing and adventure and exploring with my kids and seeing how they kind of continue to grow. Which is fun because you see like a mirror of yourself in them, the
Yeah,
good and the bad. But it's fun. It's been fun.
that's amazing. And
Yeah.
for my question is, do you think you found happiness?
Parts of it. Yes. Um, I have to figure out a way though, like how to continuously like harbor that or like be able to like take that step back, because I get so caught up in like the day to day, and I have a really good heart that I care so genuinely about people that I don't like disappointing people. So that will send me like very much into a spiral, which I can't stand. And then I'll become like, I'll overthink things and like, that whole spiral as well. So yes, I can say that I'm confidently happy, but we all have those moments where it's just like, damn, like I wish I could go back to that moment and what I felt there. But trying to figure out how to have a higher percentage of happiness than unhappiness, which has been a journey.
Well, I love that response. I love how you were so honest. 'Cause a lot of people are just like, "Yeah, I'm happy,"
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's a constant journey. And how do
Totally.
you there's only, like, moments of happiness, like, how do you know when you're consistently happy? Like, it's all confusing.
Yes. Yes.
But it's to end off, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you. Like I said, I think that like having these conversations are so important and impactful and just give you real time reflection, which is great. So appreciate you asking me to be on.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Actually Talk. I hope you guys found a sense of comfort and connection to Diana's story, as I truly did. And please stay tuned for future episodes and reach out to my email or my Instagram DMs, all linked below, if you guys have any questions, comments, suggestions, or if you would like to be on Let's Actually Talk. Thanks, guys.